if we look at it from like a 1,000-foot view, there are three elements in Breivik's worldview that I think that he had when he wrote this manifesto that more or less have been mainstreamed in 2024. Hello everyone. I want to do a video, or perhaps I will do a multi-part series reflecting on Anders Behring Breivik and the mainstreaming of some of his ideas from the early aughts. My interest in this topic was sparked by recent footage released from a court appearance he made where he was trying for parole, and he was denied, of course. He is known as the sort of notorious terrorist behind the Utøya attack on the 22nd of July in 2011 in Norway. There is an article that recently came out on Nettavisen. So it's a Norwegian article. I could run it through Google Translate, but it tends to lose a lot of context in translation, so I will just try to read the article to you and just roughly translate it. So in the header here it says Anders Behring Breivik had a Russia support signal shaved onto his head, and here we see a photo. You can see if you squint a little bit that he has the SED symbol shaved onto his head. It's a bit hard to see because of his natural dirty blonde hair, and he's standing under bright lights. But there is some video footage here where I think it's a lot more salient. Here he's showing the other side of his head, and you can see the C symbol shaved in. He also has a makeshift poster that is just an A4 print paper laminated. And it reads like this: ASAP for Delta Germanic, land back, support China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, exclamation point. 1. Establish asylum centers in Shanghai, St. Petersburg, Tehran, and Paigong. 2. Industries, $ from there. All $Nordfront.se, migrate to conservative zone in the city, end quote. I mean, just to translate for people who are not completely online into and who frequent these extremist spaces, I think the broader context of what's happened here is that he has gone from this ideology of like the defenders of Europe, Templar Knight, Counter-Jihadism that he believed in the early 2000s onto a more sort of anti-liberal, anti-Western, Eurasianist, global South sympathetic worldview. And is saying something like, as soon as possible, Germanic white people should take their lands back. The land back is a very kind of third worldist. It sounds almost like a leftist term. Support China, Russia, Iran. So yeah, that's kind of like the modern South anti-Western alliance. It's not North Korea is not in the BRICS yet, but they are currently helping Russia in their war against Ukraine. So I assume he sees those countries as like the core of the kind of anti-liberal powers in the world. And I think it's natural to assume that he wants to establish asylum centers for political refugees inside the capital or large cities in those countries, and establish industry. And then he also recommends that people send money to Nordfront.se, that is the Swedish chapter of the Nordic resistance movement. And that movement has chapters all over Scandinavia and the Baltics. So we can look at the video and see what he says.
Jeg kan nå ta to spørsmål.
I also want to note that he is holding his hand in this type of a hand symbol, and I don't know if this is supposed to be a joke or if it's serious. Where I mean, originally this is just the OK hand symbol, but it's been, it was astroturfed by 4chan at one point to troll the ADL as some kind of white power symbol, where these three fingers are supposed to be like a W, and this and like the thumb and the index is supposed to be like a P with the long finger here, so it's supposed to mean white power. And there's a lot of things he's doing in court that I'm not sure if he's doing seriously or if he's doing it in jest. And we'll see more of that when he starts arguing with the judge. But see, now he's taking questions.
Ja. Angrer du på det du gjorde 22. juli 2011?
Det skal jeg snakke om i forklaringen min. Var det et annet spørsmål?
Hvordan ser du på de handlingene i dag?
Det kommer jeg også tilbake til.
Hvorfor kommer du?
So the Mail reporter basically asks him, do you regret your actions on the 22nd of July? And do you look at those actions differently? And he avoids those questions. He'll say that he will talk about that during his testimony in court, and he will circle back to that later. And then the female reporter asks him, what does this poster mean? Like, what's the message behind that?
Med dette budskapet, hva betyr det?
Jeg ikke en person, jeg har ikke vært en person på 13 år. Jeg en kollektivist, og jeg en politisk soldat som fortsetter å tjene mine fraksjoner. Og håpet i dag at dommeren skal akseptere avhøpet mitt, så jeg kan bli en sivil person igjen. Frem til da så kommer jeg til å representere mine fraksjoner for å kjempe mot hvit folkemord. I den forbindelse så vi alliert med Russland og Kina og Iran, og i den forbindelse ønsker vi en slutt på krigen.
Hva vil du gjøre?
So he says that I'm not an individual, I'm a collectivist who's representing political factions, and he's using we a lot here, and I'm not exactly sure who he's referring to because he is serving his prison sentence alone. He was referring to a pluralist, a plurality of people in the Manifesto at times, but there's never been proven that there were more active people than him, or that this Templar Knights organization had more members. So I'm wondering if this is also some kind of schizophrenic idea that he has. He says that he is allied with Iran, Russia, and China to fight white genocide, and he wants to end the war. I'm assuming then he means the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. And he says that he wants to go from being like a collectivist to becoming like a civil, private person again, if he is released. So then the female reporter asks him, what will you do if you attain parole?
Dersom du blir prøveløslatt.
Da skal jeg forlate Norge så raskt som mulig, hvis jeg får lov. Det er opp til dommeren å vurdere hva Norge ønsker. Om de ønsker at jeg skal jobbe med sikkerhetstjenesten mot ekstremisme, så jeg villig til å gjøre det. Det som uansett vil være et faktum, at hvis jeg får en exit-mulighet i fremtiden, så vil jeg være i bunnløs gjeld til den norske stat, og det noe jeg tar veldig seriøst. Alternativt så kan jeg holde kjeft resten av livet. Men det jo opp til dommeren.
Okay, so he says that if he is released unconditionally, then he will leave Norway immediately. I'm assuming that he will, try to attain political asylum in Russia, which is something that they have. It's a program that they have started. Political asylum seekers from the West who, will not have the same requirements for learning Russian and the Russian language and Russian history. So he also says that he is open to working with the Norwegian intelligence in counter-extremism work. Alternatively, if the Norwegian state chooses to lock him up again, he will be silent for the rest of his life. At least that's what he says in this statement. So I can just try to summarize what is being said in the rest of the article. They summarize what he said in the interview, and then they explain what happened afterward. So it says here, arguments with the judge. So before Breivik's explanation, a discussion started between the judge, Lena Fagervold. The background is that he gets 45 minutes for his testimony, but he said he needed more time. Quote, I need 69 minutes because it's important to me to explain myself, said the convicted terrorist to the judge. He suggested that he could also remove time from his closing remarks if it's possible to do this in court. So I'm already just like with the finger symbol that he's doing, that he's asking for 69 minutes specifically. I don't know if this is supposed to be some elaborate joke on his part, because 69 has the connotation to that the sexual position, where people use that as a joke, or it could be a reference to the amount of victims that were killed at Utøya, if we don't count the people who died during the bombing in Oslo. Or it could just be that he has calculated to the minute that he needs exactly this amount of time to do his prepared testimony, which of course it's also there's something that's just kind of annoying about it. Why he would not just ask to get 1 hour or round up to 70 minutes? It's very peculiar behavior. So if I was the judge, I would have been agitated by a request like this, just simply on those details alone. So the judge commented that if closing remarks should be short, usually 4 to 5 minutes, therefore he would have to compress his testimony. So some of what you will say might also be answered through, some of what you want to say might also be answered during the question and answer segment, said the judge. So it says here that they just basically keep arguing, but the judge politely declined, and he had to just stay within the 45-minute time limit. And then it just says that his request for parole was rejected. So he is going back to prison again, and I don't know when we will see him the next time. I'm not sure what exactly he was expecting. If he was expecting to be taken seriously with this parole request, or if he just wanted the attention to sort of show off this poster here, the C marks, and try to talk about, because I don't have access to the transcript or footage from his testimony. That would have been interesting to hear his full explanation. But the only thing you have here is like these photos where he's holding the poster, and and he has like the C haircut, the Teddy Boy Greg style. So yeah, I don't know if he was actually serious about getting parole, or if he just wanted to use that right to get the message out, whatever he was trying to say here. So the reason that I find this interesting is that he released, at the same time as the terror attacks were happening, he was mailing out his manifesto, and the manifesto is about 1,500 pages. It's titled 2083, A European Declaration of Independence. And in that manifesto, he outlines his sort of anti-Muslim, anti-Marxist views. He describes himself as a crusader against cultural Marxism. His manifesto also contains instruction and planning for the attacks, and how he, particularly, the nuts and bolts of how he goes through with achieving his goals. So, following his arrest on Utøya, he was tried and convicted. In August 2012, he was sentenced to 21 years in prison. This is Norway's maximum penalty, with the possibility for infinite extensions. And the consensus among experts is that he will be in prison for the rest of his life, simply because of the controversy, even though he seems to be well behaved inside prison from the reports that I have read. The thing is that he has never shown any remorse for his actions, and he remains controversial and as a sort of bogeyman for far-right extremism in Europe. So yeah, his manifesto is very long. I think it reads like a master thesis. I read it when it, at least parts of it when it came out. I don't have the patience to sit and read 1,500 pages like that, but I tried to at least read some of the parts that I found the most interesting, like the planning bits, because some of the other parts, it's sort of referencing other bloggers and other books that I wasn't familiar with, so it wasn't that interesting for me at the time, and I was not that politically engaged either. But it did strike me how much work he put into his manifesto, considering that nobody had access to ChatGPT or artificial language models in 2011. It's very organized content with the references, the content tables. Mainstream news in Norway made a big deal out of the plagiarism, but that doesn't take away from the amount of patience and organizing that went into doing something like this. He has a part in his manifesto on page 8 where he talks about how many sacrifices he made to create this compendium, and he claims to have spent 9 years of his life working on the project. I assume that's just not writing the manifesto, but generally planning for the terror attack, attaining all the materials for the bombs and the weapons, and figuring out how it was supposed to be executed and how he was going to spread the message in the most effective way. He claims that he spent about 317,000 euros out of his own money on this project, where of course half of that is like what do you call lost money, or at least money that he what do they call that in economics, the alternative costs that he could have made half of that money, but about half of it, say about 130,000 euros, were spent out of his own pocket. What's interesting about him in general, I think, is the fact that he's not a loser in the conventional sense. That you'd find someone who would set off a bomb or go on a shooting spree. Usually they're socially inept, or they can't get an education, they can't get a proper income, so they're relegated to often a kind of miserable life where they might be living with relatives, and they're living on welfare. Their psychological health will deteriorate, and it would be sort of a self-reinforcing cycle. But with Breivik, it's clear that he would have had the potential to have a comfortable job, and generally a sort of a comfortable life just based on his human capital. But he chose to go all the way with on this sort of ideological path. So his manifesto is organized into three parts. Firstly, there's the sort of diagnostics, the solution, and the third is the practical section that I mentioned previously, where he's talking about the nuts and bolts of how he plans and executes the terror attack. In this video, what I think is the most interesting is the sort of the change in ideology from what you're reading in that manifesto onto the more kind of anti-liberal one that you're seeing in this article where he's in the courts. So in the manifesto, the world that he's describing is a world where the West and Europe is being crushed in a sort of pincer movement between cultural Marxism and Islamism, where the cultural Marxists and the Islamists are working in concert with each other, and to say that when he says cultural Marxism, he means political correctness, cultural relativism, multiculturalism, humanism, etc. It's sort of everything that's wrong with the university systems. It's really more of a blanket term for leftism, sort of intellectual leftism in Europe and in the West. He does bring up some concrete people like Antonio Gramsci, the Frankfurt School types like Marcuse, Adorno, etc. He says that they are trying to attain more of this classless utopian matriarchal society using cultural hegemony instead of the material dialectic principles from Karl Marx and the revolutions. So, and on the other hand, the political Islamists, that's the immigrants and the refugees that are coming in from various Islamic countries. And the ultimate goal is to subjugate the Western kind of nationalist conservative populations with these immigrants, and that hopefully then the political leftist elite would get rid of the Islamists afterwards. I mean, this part is a little bit more obtruse as to how exactly this works, and that's one of the more conspiratorial parts of his manifesto is trying to glue these parts together. How exactly? I mean, because it's not controversial to say that there are leftists in universities and politics in bureaucracy, and that there are Islamist elements that are coming into Europe and that were coming into Europe at that time. But it gets a little bit more complicated when you try to explain how exactly they are conspiring together to destroy conservatism in a very directed effort. So there are bloggers that he uses to explain this, like Fjordman. Fjordman, the Norwegian blogger, is taking a lot from books like Eurabia, the Euro-Arab Axis, that's written by the Jewish woman Bat Ye'o from Egypt. I think that needs to be a video all on its own and just explaining the intricacies of those theories. But if we look at it from like a 1,000-foot view, there are three elements in Breivik's worldview that I think that he had when he wrote this manifesto that more or less have been mainstreamed in 2024. And I would categorize them as the following. The first would be the sort of anti-leftism, anti-university ideas. The second one would be the counter-jihadist ideas, and the third would be the political Christianity. And I mean, where are we seeing that currently? If you look at people like James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, Peter Boghossian, who are writing these books like Cynical Theories. I mean, Lindsay is a lot more creative when he's talking about this stuff. He has like all these weird titles like the Maoism, fascist communism, all these sort of weird neologisms that he invents to sit and talk about what's going on in universities, and it's kind of like diversity, equity, inclusion, woke, all of this stuff. You could basically just call it anti-woke to a certain extent. The more intellectual side of the anti-woke movement is very similar to the criticism that Breivik puts forward in his manifesto. And I'm not trying to say this as a smear against the people who are doing this and connecting them to Breivik and saying that they're all mass murderers. I'm just saying that the views that he fronted that were completely toxic by the time he had been put in prison have now more or less become mainstreamed and are seen as sort of center-right in many aspects. So someone else would be Jordan Peterson, who's also very big into this anti-woke postmodernism, I guess is the term that he's been using, the postmodern neo-Marxism. It's really referring to the same thing, even though he has like a slightly different canon of authors that he refers to. You have the intellectual dark web with Eric and Brett Weinstein, Ben Shapiro, some other people like Gad Saad, Camilla Paglia, Stephen Hicks. It's a very large sort of ecosystem of these kind of anti-woke, anti-university leftism people, where people just come in and out and they do book tours and speaking engagement about this. It's very popular. You just go on podcasts to talk about your anti-woke views. The second idea is the counter-jihad politics, and there you can just see by the amount of populist parties that have been elected in Europe, like Geert Wilders' Freedom Party, for example. Geert Wilders is one of the OG counter-jihad types in Europe, right? And the Netherlands have been one of these sort of epicenters for the Netherlands, France. These countries have been the kind of the epicenters of Islamic terror in like the early 2000s and the 2010s. We have Tony Robinson. He's still active. The Daily Wire is also in this with the kind of the Judeo-Christian branch. Douglas Murray would be a character that's involved. And lastly, it's the political Christianity, and I'm trying to separate these as three different branches, but they're very interwoven with each other into what has become what I would consider a sort of mainstream, center-right viewpoint, or at least whatever you think the center-right is now. I think that you see characters who believe in these things. And Jordan Peterson is here again. He is what I consider like a political Christian. Russell Brand is recently converted and is trying to, take the rounds. He's doing prayers with Tucker Carlson, all this stuff. Shia LaBeouf has converted. Kanye West has also tried to capitalize on his sort of newfound Christianity. And at the intersection of all of these is a character that's been very in the background for me, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, whose claim to fame was really being connected to the new atheist movement. But I was not aware of this, but Ayaan Hirsi Ali has actually become a Christian as well. It went completely under my radar because I never found her to be very interesting. But she is I'm not going to read the whole article here, but she wrote this article for Unheard for about 1 year ago, where she says why I'm now a Christian. I guess it's a sort of play on the Bertrand Russell essay Why I'm Not a Christian. And the subtitle is Atheism Can't Equip Us for Civilizational War. And if you read this article, it's really more of an argument for like why we need to have Judeo-Christianity because it's a stronger kind of civilizational power than humanist liberalism. That's essentially what this is. It's not ontological arguments. It's not philosophical arguments. It's just like a purely political argument that is made here. So she's made some recent appearances on podcasts where she goes more into this, and it seems like there were psychological reasons for this as well. But if you, at least based on this article, it's very much in the times with where people are standing now politically. And the thing is that Breivik was also very interested in the idea of political Christianity, where he's presents it as this kind of Crusader Templar idea, but it's really more about just trying to re-Christianize Europe. I think he mentions Christianity over 1,000 times in his manifesto, and he mentions Ayaan Hirsi Ali as well. He believes that Ayaan Hirsi Ali should get the Nobel Peace Prize. I can actually read that part for you. Here we are on page 643 of the Breivik's manifesto, and he says, so it's point 270, give the Nobel Peace Prize to Ayaan Hirsi Ali. So, today, Al Gore and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, represented by Dr. R.K. Pachauri, will receive the Nobel Peace Prize for 2007 in Oslo, Norway. The Peace Prize has been viewed by many as something of a joke after it has been awarded to the jihadist Yasser Arafat and to appeasement of jihad like Jimmy Carter. Yeah, so he hates Jimmy Carter for being an appeaser, basically, but an appeaser to Muslims. However, it still generates a lot of media attention. If the Nobel Committee wants to stay relevant, they need to do some changes. The greatest challenge to the world peace right now is the global warming. It's not global warming, it's global jihad. Therefore, I suggest that the next Peace Prize should be awarded to Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I have had a few minor disagreements with Hirsi Ali in the past, mainly because she has, on some occasions, compared Islam to other religions like Christianity and Judaism, which I believe is wrong. However, her views on this have matured considerably, and because of her background, she has made criticisms of Islam acceptable to people who would otherwise find it difficult to digest the arguments she presents, even though they are perfectly correct. She is no doubt an extremely courageous person. In spite of death threats, she has never hesitated in pointing out the many of the problems with the Islamic world and that are caused by Islam itself. She is an invaluable asset to the fight against global jihad and as worthy of a prize as any living person. In my view, the Norwegian Nobel Committee will soon have to make a choice. If they want the Nobel Peace Prize to be a global celebrity award for outstanding achievements in political correctness, they can give the next one to Bono of the rock group U2, or they can do something meaningful and something that will actually advance the cause of peace and human liberty around the world and award the Nobel Peace Prize of 2008 to Ayaan Hirsi Ali. So, yeah, I think that that kind of sums it up in a sense. Like, this was his view in 2011, and now kind of like the mainstream MAGA right is this sort of Judeo-Christian, counter-jihadist, Christian apologetic, anti-woke coalition, which is there's something that's really just surreal about it, but this is where we are. So yeah, if you've watched this far, you could leave me a like and or maybe a comment if you have something interesting to say. So thank you for your time.